This episode is sponsored by NordVPN, the best and safest way to protect your online private data. Sign up to NordVPN now and get an exclusive discount by going to nordvpn.com/evolutionofhorror. That's nordvpn.com/evolutionofhorror. On July 16th, 1945, at 5:29 a.m. in White Sands, New Mexico, the United States Army conducted the first ever detonation of a nuclear bomb. This became known as the Trinity Test. Less than a month later, on August 6th, America bombed Hiroshima, and the world witnessed just how much devastation one man-made creation could wreak. The world had something new to fear: the existential threat of the atomic bomb. As such, by the 1950s, the horror genre shifted away from gothic monsters towards atomic monsters. Films about radiation creating unspeakable creatures and monsters.
I tell you, gentlemen, science has agreed that unless something is done and done quickly, man as the dominant species of life on Earth will be extinct within a year.
Meanwhile, television, another man-made creation popularized in the 1950s, meant that cinema had to up its game to compete. So the atomic monster films relied on giant creatures and large-scale spectacle. Gone were the days of creatures lurking in the shadows. Now the horror was big, brash and bold. Colourful posters, titles with exclamation marks, and giant monsters coming to destroy us all.
For born in that swirling inferno of radioactive dust were things so horrible, so terrifying, so hideous. There is no word to describe them.
Join me as we continue exploring the evolution of man-made monsters, and we discuss a giant bug double bill, them and Tarantula. Welcome back to the Evolution of Horror. My name is Mike Muncer. As ever, I am your host. In this podcast, we explore and dissect the history and the evolution of the horror genre, one subgenre at a time. We are currently in the midst of our 11th season exploring the evolution of man-made monsters, and this is part 10. In this week's episode, as that intro suggested, we are moving into the atomic monster age of the 1950s. We are going to be discussing them, exclamation mark, from 1954, and Tarantula, no exclamation mark, from 1955. Both of these discussions will be spoilerific. Not that there's a huge amount of plot to spoil, but I would still urge you to give these films a watch before you listen to our discussion. So, joining me to discuss these two bangers, a returning guest. He was here on part 1 of our series introducing the subgenre to us, and he's back, encyclopedia of film and television, and co-host of the brand new Evolution of Horror Hammer podcast, Hammer Time, Kevin Lyons. Hello, Kev.
Hello again.
Hello.
How are you?
How are you doing, Kev? It's been a busy week of podcasting for you.
Yeah, if my voice gives out, it's because I'm such a popular man. What can I tell you? I don't know.
Yeah, well, exactly. You're on high demand, right? Because actually, as we record this and as this episode goes out, a brand new podcast has just launched that you're co-hosting, Hammer Time, where you're talking about all of the Hammer horror films with Becky, right? So that's
right.
A fun one.
Yes, I think it's 63 episodes in total we're going to be doing.
Ooh.
So if you're, one of those very strange people who don't like me, I mean, why would you not? Then I'm sorry, but the next year is going to be quite difficult for you, and you have my sympathies.
I think it's going to be really fun. I mean, we've recorded at this point the first couple of episodes, haven't we?
Yeah.
I've been kind of lurking as the producer in the background, but it's going to be really fun because obviously you're a lifelong diehard Hammer fan, right?
Oh,
but
yeah.
Becky is like relatively new to this. I think she's only seen sort of 5 or 6 Hammer films ever, so that's going to be quite a fun journey.
Well, that's the interesting thing about this, and I've said this in the podcast, you'll hear me talk about this, that the majority of my Hammer-loving friends are all old blokes like me.
Yes.
So to be speaking to a younger woman about them, and her seeing them for the first time...
Yeah. Yeah.
It's going to be really interesting. So far, we haven't come to blows, but as you say, we've only done 2 episodes, so, you know, the podcast is yet young. We could end up trying to kill each other. But
oh, it's very funny. I mean, you know, Hammer, we'll see this as we go on this journey, right? But Hammer has some ups and downs, doesn't
of course
it? I mean,
do.
You don't love all of them,
no,
do you? That's
no,
the
I should
thing,
make that very clear. I'm not going to be kind to every Hammer film.
No.
I love Hammer films, but there are 1 or 2.
Yes.
And anybody out there who's a diehard Hammer fan like me will be sitting there reeling off the titles in their head already. I know exactly which ones Lyons is going to foam at the mouth about. Because, you know, they had their ups and downs, and that's the way it was. That's the way... When you're doing 60-something episodes on one film company...
Yeah.
You can't expect them all to be classics.
Well, when you churn out as many films as that across 20 years, exactly, you can't...
And that's the thing,
really
we are
imagine.
talking about 20 years.
Yeah.
You know, and these weren't the only films that they were producing during that period. They were doing comedies, they were doing dramas, they were doing, you know, war films and all sorts. So the fact that they kept up the standard as highly as they did across that time, as you will find out, and there will, I hope... Even the ones I don't like, we're going to have fun with.
Oh, absolutely. So, absolutely. Yeah. They're going to be fun to discuss, aren't they? I think.
They are.
Either
yes.
way. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to hearing that kind of... I don't know, the way in which those films change and evolve across that 20-year period as well.
Definitely. You know, so. And there will be a couple of episodes. You and Becky can just come on. You can press record. She can do the introduction. You guys can go down the pub and I will just rant and rave for 2 hours about how awful this film is. So, but yes, Hammer fans, bear with me. There will be a couple that I don't like.
Which movie are you sort of most... looking forward to discussing with Becky? Which one are you least looking forward to discussing with Becky?
I think we talked about this in the podcast, and my flippant answer was everything between the Quatermass experiments and To the Devil a Daughter. So basically all of them, even the bad ones, have got something interesting to say about them. But I think, you know, things like Dracula, Brides of Dracula, To the Devil a Daughter, Quatermass in the Pit, Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed, you know, some really great films that we've got to talk about, Taste of Evil. Some marvellous films to talk about. So all of those are going to be fun.
It's very exciting. And actually, if people are listening to this on the day it drops, this episode, you and Becky are actually going to be in London this weekend hosting a screening of Quatermass and Quatermass 2, right? So that's
right,
exciting.
yes. Yeah. So I've never seen them on the big screen before, so that's going to be quite...
amazing.
Quite an experience for me as well. So two of my favourites.
I love it. Marvellous. I love it. Excellent. Well, there you go. Well, we are going to slightly shift away from British Hammer and talk a little bit about the wave of American horror that was coming out in the mid-1950s, Kev. A little bit different to the kind of gothic stuff, right? The atomic... like this kind of era of 1950s kind of horror was known for being this era of the kind of the atomic monster, right?
Yeah.
Why did this happen, do you think? Why was it that we sort of turned, or at least American filmmakers and audiences turned away from the kind of classic gothic monsters and towards this kind of new type of horror?
It is basically because the bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and we saw for the first time what we were capable of. You know, the end of the world was now nigh. I was going to try and quote that thing from the Wall of 28 Days Later. The end of the world is very fucking nigh.
Right, yeah.
That's what it felt like to people in the 1950s. You know, they'd seen the devastating power that one bomb could unleash.
Yeah.
You know, so Britain had lived through the Blitz and everything, and we'd seen waves of multiple bombings.
Yeah.
And then suddenly one bomb levels an entire city.
Yeah.
And then almost immediately they start building weapons that can pretty much devastate an entire country.
Right.
And so all of a sudden vampires and werewolves and ghosts, they were still scary, but they didn't have that existential dread.
Right.
That the bomb gave us. So you could see why they shifted away. A lot of times horror and science fiction filmmakers are really reacting to the way the public are feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so with public fears about the bomb and the end of the world looked like it was going to come.
Right.
Slightly later, I was born in 1962, Bay of Pigs and Cuban Missile Crisis happens the next year, and I've told this story before about how my parents didn't think me and my newborn little brother were going to make it.
Right, wow.
They really thought the world was going to end. So it was a real fear, a real sort of dread that people had. And of course, filmmakers were going to jump on board with that.
Yeah.
Some of them took it seriously. Some of them took it a little less seriously, looking at you, Roger Corman, who I absolutely adore, but still, look at some of your films. But
yes. Well, do you know what? Is it weird that it sort of gives me comfort to hear that back then was just as scary as it is now? People thought the world was going to end back in the early 60s, just as they do right now. I think
it's one of those things, and I know this may well upset people, that when you're on social media, you do see an awful lot. And I've seen it, I think, 3 times this year. Mm-hmm. This is it, World War III.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I've been hearing it since at least the 1980s. Yeah, every time there's a bit of a conflict somewhere, this is it, it's the end of the world. And it's like, honestly, guys, it's not. We're still here. I'm not saying it won't happen. I'm hoping it won't happen. I think the chances are actually much less than we think it is. I think we worry about it more disproportionately simply because of the effects it could have if it did happen.
Totally. Yeah. And I think there's this interesting fear surrounding the atomic bomb as well. It's not just about the mass devastation, not just about the fact that it could level a city, but it's more the kind of long-term radiation effects, I suppose,
it is.
right?
Yeah.
And this is the thing that I feel like the sort of fear that these movies really tap into. It's not just the idea of a foreign outsider bombing them and flattening Americans in their homes. It's actually more about Americans doing experiments in the middle of Nevada or White Sands.
That's right.
And what effect that could have on them on their doorstep, I suppose.
I mean, in fairness, we don't really understand, as lay people, we don't really understand the full effects of radiation now. You and I are not scientists. We may have an interest in science, but we don't really understand it fully. And I think back in the 1950s, they didn't understand it at all.
Right. Yeah.
Prior to World War II, did anybody talk about radiation? It was always there.
No.
Always there. It's a natural occurrence, but no one talked about it until those bombs were dropped. And then suddenly there's this mysterious force that we can't see it, we can't touch it, we can't reason with it, we can't taste it or smell it, but it's going to make us grow an extra arm and our equipment is all going to fall off and things like that. And these were major fears for people at the time.
Yeah.
They didn't know what it was going to do to them.
Exactly. There's something almost kind of Lovecraftian about the horror of this, isn't there? This idea of like people are going to grow tentacles and bugs are going to grow to the size of houses and everything else. Like like you say, I guess this is what horror thrives on, isn't it? The complete unknown.
Oh,
and there is something really unknowable about an atomic bomb and what could actually happen,
We've only ever used 2 in anger.
Right.
I say we, as a species, we've only ever used 2 in anger. We've let a hell of a lot of them off over time. Yeah. But we don't really understand. Those were tests. They weren't used on people. Yeah. So only twice have we used them on people. Yeah. I am using the species we here. I mean, I take no responsibility for what they did.
It wasn't Kevin Lyons personally.
It wasn't me pressing the button. God knows there have been times, and very recent times, I've looked at the state of the world and I've thought, give me the button now.
Give me the button.
And get on with it. But I think, people just didn't understand. I'm not entirely sure they completely understand now. After we had Chernobyl, people were terrified that was, it was going to be a desert wasteland. Yeah. But life has thrived. It's adapted. It's still, it's still there. Animals still live in there and plants still grow. I mean, I wouldn't want to eat them, but, they have found a way. Life finds a way.
It does.
As a great man once said.
That's a great man once said. Exactly. Yeah. I think that's right. Chernobyl is a perfect example, actually, isn't it, of this idea of it wasn't an attack. It wasn't a bomb. And yet just the effects of radiation. Anyone who's seen the TV show Chernobyl knows how horrific that is, right?
Any of us old enough to been an adult at the time and remember it and thinking, well, what does this mean for me? I was living on the Isle of Wight. I was miles away from Ukraine. It was like, and I was still thinking, is it coming? Yeah. Is it here? I can't see it because you can't see it. Is it already here? I don't know. And so, it was a very scary time. And that's within my life. All of this is within my lifetime, and people still don't understand it.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. And I think whether this is connected or not, I think the 1950s America also have this reputation as being this real sort of conservative period, I suppose, right? We're talking McCarthyism, we're talking kind of, paranoia, and there's an isolationism, I suppose, and with it, this kind of return to sort of, I guess, what people might call sort of traditional family values and morality and that kind of thing, right?
Sure.
All feels like it's very much looped into the way in which these American horror stories are told in the 1950s.
Of course, yeah. I mean, and all this is linked back again to the Second World War.
Right.
I know younger people get very fed up of us older people constantly harping on about the war, but it was such a huge event.
Yeah.
That changed everything in the 20th century. And so a lot of what we were seeing in the 1950s was a reaction to what had happened a decade earlier. And of course, you've got things like the Cold War was breaking out. That was, we got a new enemy, but this time the war wasn't going to be like the one we just had. The one we just had, you could put men in tanks and send them out to sacrifice themselves and all the rest of it. This one was going to be fought by long distance.
Yeah.
And it was people were struggling, I think, to get their heads around this idea of this new geopolitical stalemate that was going on, very fragile stalemate. The rise of communism, I think, it had been there prior to the war, but it really took off for Americans after the war. That was when they realised, here's another enemy we can worry about.
Yeah.
And the traditional family values at that time were being challenged on all fronts. Women had been out to work in the war.
Yeah.
Unheard of. Unheard of. And when the men came back, or the ones that survived came back, they wanted their jobs back.
Right.
And so women, know your place, women, get back to the kitchen, that's where you belong. And women weren't going to sit still for that. They'd had a little taste of the freedom. It took a little while. It took another decade or two for it to really sort of get into its stride. But I think the seed was planted.
Yes.
During that period. And women thought, well, we don't have to just sit at home or be someone's secretary and be leered at all day. We can actually do something useful in society. But, sort of traditional family values sort of held them back a little bit. The nuclear family, which has got nothing to do with bombs, incidentally, was became the new cultural ideal.
It did. And I suppose that also links in, I was reading up a bit about this, about the kind of the popularisation of suburbia happened in the 1950s as well, which coincided with actually the kind of nuclear threat, right? That a lot of families with more money realised that it was less safe for them to be in cities, and they would move outside of cities well. And suddenly you got this idea of the kind of the Pleasantville, Stepford kind of perfectly pruned lawns and white picket fences and middle class, like you say, nuclear families and all of that kind of thing.
Of course. I mean, suburbia was a huge development for Americans. In the 1950s, Americans were wealthier than anywhere. They survived the post-war period much better than any other country, I think.
Yeah.
They became quite wealthy.
Yeah.
And so they were able to move into these nice houses out in the supposedly safe suburbs. Consumerism started to rise.
Right.
They wanted for very little. There were huge social tensions. We know that.
Yes.
We know there were huge social tensions. But on the surface, things looked good for white America. And that's the important thing here. I think we need to that white America was doing very well.
Yeah.
If you weren't white, a bit more of a struggle, frankly. It might still be. Who am I to say? But and all of these, the rise in consumerism, that clashed with the ideals of communism, or the ideals that were being sold about communism.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily what communism was actually about, but they were being sold a vision of it that, they're going to come and take your cosy home in suburbia.
Exactly.
And they're going to turn you all into a giant commune. You're not going to be allowed to own anything. Complete nonsense, of course. But this, in turn, led to a rise in, a resurgence in religious sentiment. Because again, we were being told about the godless communists.
Yes.
They don't like God. God doesn't like them.
Right.
And it was 1956 that the words "In God We Trust" was adopted as the official motto of the United States.
Right. Well, there you go. That's interesting.
There you go. So this is the backdrop against which all of this is happening.
Yeah, I think that is really interesting, that kind of Christian conservatism that became so popular in the 50s. And I think that does coincide with the fear of the bomb too, and this kind of quite inherent, I think, sort of fear of science, essentially, right? I think, the fact that science, and we've talked about this ever since Frankenstein, but this idea of messing with nature and God and playing God is a sin and should be punished, essentially, right? that is also at the crux of these 1950s monster movies,
Of course
essentially, isn't it? Yeah.
People didn't understand the science. There's a lovely quote I must give you. It's only a few words, but it's quite devastating. That was written in the logbook of Captain Robert Lewis, who was the co-pilot of Enola Gay, the bomber that dropped the bombs on Hiroshima. And he simply wrote the words, "My God, what have we done?"
Right.
And I think that sums up the whole feelings about science and technology and scientists in particular, that these people were up to something that we didn't understand.
Yeah.
And they were expecting us to do things which were horrific, and we didn't understand what we were doing.
Right.
And yeah, actually, I still see that now. I still see people queuing up for the latest iPhone or something. They haven't figured out how the last one works yet. And, there's this sort of seduction of technology and science. And I love science. I'm very pro-science. I don't understand much of it, but I love science.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm not at all anti-science. But it's the fact that I don't understand it that makes me vulnerable to it. Mm-hmm. I see things, particularly because, my music, I see new music technology and I think, oh, excellent, I'll save up and buy that. And then I think, hang on a minute, I've got tons of it here I've never used. What do I want it for? And it's very seductive. And that's why I think people think scientists and technologists, they're up to something.
Oh, always.
They're not to be trusted, are they?
People didn't trust the microwave when that was invented, did they? They're like, what's this?
Oh, God, I remember that.
What's this devilish invention,
My generation were told not to sit too close to the television because it'd do our eyes in.
Right, yeah.
And sort of unplug the television at night because it will blow up.
Exactly.
These were the things that lead to these kind of movies, the fact that the public didn't understand even the basics.
Yeah.
So it was so easy for, these films are the ultimate exploitation films.
Right, yeah.
Because they're exploiting our fears of things that we have in our homes sometimes. I hope no one's got a nuclear bomb in their home. If they have, rethink your life, okay?
Exactly.
But we all have technology. We're doing this on technology. We're surrounded by technology.
Yeah.
And do we understand it?
No. Absolutely not.
If your computer breaks down this afternoon, do you know how to fix it?
Absolutely not. Not a clue. No, exactly.
No, it's get on your phone, if it's still working, get online and order a new one, isn't it? And just junk the old one, because we don't understand anything about the technologies and sciences that make our lives, frankly, quite good.
Right, exactly. So I think all of that is kind of rolled up in these movies. And I think what's really interesting as well, when you look at a lot of these sorts of movies from, let's say, the 70s onwards, they're much more kind of, I guess, critical of kind of the systems, the establishment, people in power. That wasn't the case here. When you watch these movies, they're quite black and white. They're quite good and evil, right? And often the good guys are, they're the army, they're the FBI, they're the people in power who are trustworthy kind of right stuff looking men that will come and save the day.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. You have a few shifty scientists here and there. If they're not shifty, they're a bit bumbling.
Well, the scientists are different because they are anti-Christian and immoral, Kev. That's the thing.
Exactly. That's what it is. Whereas good, upstanding military guys and FBI agents, so we know we can totally trust them, don't we?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to get so cancelled, aren't I? I'm in so much trouble. Oh dear. But I mean, that's what these films were doing. It was like, I don't want to get too political about it, but they were kind of reaffirming the authority.
I think so.
The state systems, basically, that, always trust the military, always trust the police, always trust the FBI. Do not trust that man in a lab coat.
Right. Exactly.
Because he's sitting there in his laboratory and he's doing stuff.
Right. Exactly.
And he explains what it is, but he explains it in a way that I can't understand it. Therefore, that's not my failing, that's his failing. He's up to something.
Exactly.
And that's kind of and it still works today, I'm afraid. It's still
and most of these films, apart from that inherent kind of, atomic radiation, nuclear weapons are bad message, apart from that, they're not really interested in sort of subtext or political kind of allegories.
No.
These are fun kind of, and this is the other thing, right? They, movie audiences were starting to change. This was the kind of birth of the kind of teenager demographic, wasn't it? And double bills and drive-in movie features and that kind of thing. And you feel that when you watch these, right? These are essentially popcorn entertainment.
Of course they are. And eventually the whole thing just becomes about teenagers fighting monsters.
Right, yeah.
And alien invasions. The films we're talking about today, there are grown-ups involved.
Yes.
For the most part. But it's only going to be another year or two before the teenagers become a thing.
Yeah.
You know, in a couple of years' time, rock and roll will happen.
Right.
Teenagers are going to have money, so they're going to start making films with teenagers as the heroes.
Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, they could be fun. And, you know, when I was a teenager, it was great, you know, because I was a teenager. We were going to stick it to the man. We were going to change the world.
Yeah.
As a grumpy old 63-year-old, I'm sitting there thinking, oh, for God's sake, just get over yourselves.
Yeah. Do you think even these two movies we're about to discuss, do you think there is something... Do they feel more juvenile, or do they feel aimed at a younger audience than, for example, the Universal or Val Lewton movies of the 30s or 40s?
Compared to those, yes, but I think they've got a nice balance here.
Yeah.
That they are patently absurd.
Yeah.
But I think everybody involved in making it knew that they were patently absurd. I think people paying to go and see them at the cinemas or the drive-ins knew that they were absurd.
Yeah.
But we didn't care.
Right.
It was almost like a game. Can the filmmakers carry this off? Can they persuade us that it's absurd silliness about giant spiders and ants? Can it work? And bless them, I think they did it. They made us believe it.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, that's not a bad thing. I think the move towards a more juvenile kind of storytelling is a little way off, another year or two off, but it's coming. It's coming.
And I think even when you look at the poster designs, even when you look at, you know, these so many of these titles have like exclamation marks in them and stuff. There's something almost kind of comic booky about the way these movies look and present themselves.
That's right.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
One of the films we're talking about is not called Them. It's called Them.
Exactly.
It's you know, it's right in your face.
And by the way, I love the fact that the title comes up in red over the black and white as well.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. It's brilliant. They're kind of at the first shock, isn't it, in the film?
Yeah.
But I'm reminded of that scene in I think it's the very first episode of Friends where they go and see Joey's play. Yeah. And Phoebe said, it's not called Freud, it's Fried.
Yes.
It's got an exclamation mark at the end of it. And it's a bit like this, it's them. And it's really in your face. It makes no bones about the fact that it's really, really in your face. Exactly. And I love that. I love it. And the posters always promise something more than the film could ever deliver.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, if you actually... I mean, I'm not going to knock the special effects in these films much, but... If you put stills from the films on the posters, you're probably not going to get as many punters in as you'd like. So, you know, we have these, like you say, it's very comic books, sort of apocalyptic visions.
I tell you what, I love the posters. I want some of the artwork on my walls. I love the posters for these films, you know.
Love it. They're great, aren't they? Unbeatable. Yeah. They knew how to sell a film back then.
Yes.
These days, where you get far too many shots, I've got an old man rant now, too many shots on posters of just a lineup of the faces of the young people that are in it. Oh, come on, guys. We're a proper painted poster that oversells the film to me. That's what I want. I want to be promised things that I know for a fact they're not going to deliver on.
Exactly that. But actually, that's a good point. We should talk about, before we get into the films, let's just talk about the way in which filmmaking was changing too. You know, again, compared to the previous films I've been talking about this season of the sort of monster movies of the 30s, there were a lot of kind of innovations in filmmaking in the 50s, weren't they? You know, they were experimenting with different kind of almost gimmicks, I suppose, when it came to filmmaking. Right?
Well, this all came about because of another technological threat to particularly the American way of life, television.
Right. Yeah.
That was the big enemy for Hollywood. They were finding it very difficult to compete with television. Yeah. All of a sudden, families... It was cheaper to stay at home and gather around their, 10-inch television screen or whatever they had back there, because they were tiny, and the screens were tiny, and the actual televisions took up half the room. Yes. They were massive pieces of furniture. In this country, there was a whole trend in the early years of television for them to be behind shutters.
Oh wow, that's
they'd be built into a sort of a piece of furniture where you could put a screen over it to hide the television screen, so it just looked like a normal piece of television, like a piece of furniture. But this was what was happening to Hollywood, that they were finding themselves for the first time in their existence under threat. Yeah. People were staying at home. Teenagers were still going to cinemas and drive-ins because they wanted some time away from their parents to do whatever it was teenagers were going to do in cinemas and drive-ins, usually not watch the film, to be fair. But that's one of the reasons why they were changing, because this was becoming the new demographic. And so Hollywood was starting to look around and say, what can we do? What can we offer that you're not going to get at home? widescreen, Technicolor, massive biblical epics, 3D.
Right.
Anything we could, and so let's not forget that widescreen was seen as a gimmick.
Yes, of course.
When it first came in, filmmakers didn't want to do it because they were so used to the roughly square, Academy frame. And so when it came, a lot of them were very resistant to the idea of having to fill up a huge frame like that. And you can see in the early years of widescreen, you can see a few lesser films where basically they've just shot it as if it was an Academy ratio film. There's just loads of blank space on either side of the screen because they didn't quite know what to do with it.
Yeah.
But this was all their way to get people back in, make films big, spectacular, bold, something that couldn't be contained on a tiny little screen in your front room.
Right, yeah.
And so it's kind of this, Hollywood went to war with television.
Yeah.
And whether it won or not, I don't entirely know, because I think television did become increasingly dominant.
Well, we're sort of in that same place right now, aren't we?
We are.
With streaming and everything, movies are studios are struggling to figure out how to get people into cinemas as opposed to just watching what comes out on Netflix or whatever.
Do you want a couple of clues, filmmakers and film producers? All right, make it cheaper. Don't keep selling smelly food to people, and have people in cinemas who will walk around and tell people to turn their bloody phones off.
Oh yes, exactly.
I'll go back to the cinema then. But, until then, I will stay at home and watch films because it's more comfortable.
It is.
It's just more comfortable.
And these days, you only have to wait about 2 weeks before a film comes out on streaming.
Before it comes streaming anyway. Exactly. I said this before, and I'm not going off on a tangent. I'm doing the Roddy Corbett bit here, going off on a tangent. The romance of cinema has long since faded for me, I'm afraid.
Well, it's interesting. It's kind of gone back the other way now. Like we were talking about doing screenings. I do a lot of screenings now, and a lot of cinemas these days are kind of looking back. They're like, come to the cinema and they make more of an event out of it, more of an evening out of it. You watch an old classic movie on the big screen, you might get like an introduction or a panel discussion or whatever.
Exactly.
It's like making it more of a communal thing, I suppose.
The good cinemas, like the one we use, for example, and various others around London where I live, they do things like that.
Yeah.
And this is exactly where they were in the 1950s.
Right.
What can we do to tear them away from the screen?
Yeah.
They've got a harder task nowadays because, my television takes up the corner of my room and is actually quite small.
Yes.
Compared. I've seen people with televisions that look like the monolith from 2001 tipped on its side. Oh, my God. Even for me, that's a bit much. But televisions are... The picture quality is incredible, the sound is incredible, and I don't have to put up with other people.
Right, exactly.
And so, I will go to the cinema if it's a special event.
Yes.
So, yes, more special events, please.
Exactly. So there you go. I think all of those elements are interesting when coming into talking about these movies. The kind of political state of America at the time, the way in which films were relying on spectacle and gimmicks and, were loud and brash and all of that kind of thing, I think, comes into play when we talk about the two movies we're about to discuss, right?
Indeed, they do. They do indeed. Yeah, they're very spectacular on tiny budgets.
Exactly.
Which is really brilliant.
Oh, I love it. So there you go. So Them. Let's talk about Them from 1954.
Here is a wild, headlong flight into terror as the desert erupts with a grim battle for survival. Here is a fear-frenzied moment of suspense as mankind totters before a thing that multiplies faster than it can be killed. Here is a desperate plunge into the black depths of the earth, where human courage challenges the brute force, the slashing jaws, the poison fangs that guard the subterranean nest, where the beast spawns its terrible progeny.
To all units, condition red. Grain 267 is the target.
There's something nasty lurking in the deserts of New Mexico. And it's not the giant ants. They're a product of what's nasty and lurking in the deserts.
Yes.
What's lurking in the deserts is the area around the city of Alamogordo, which is where they did the Trinity tests,
right?
The first nuclear bomb. And the residual radiation from those tests... And what's nice about this film is that Alamogordo and White Sands are explicitly mentioned.
Yes,
in the dialogue. Right. It's not; they're not trying to gloss over this fact. They explicitly mention it. But the residual radiation from the Trinity test has mutated ordinary ants and turned them into giant-sized creatures who are now very angry, very hungry, and desperate for food.
Yes,
and because they're so big a little bit of sugar here and there, which is a plot device at the start, isn't enough anymore, and they start turning on whatever they can find, and that's humans. So
absolutely. Yeah, I love that the first act just involves a lot of missing sugar from places. Right? I know, it's like so sinister.
There is. I took a screenshot of this. It's hilarious. A bit later on, they've got the military communications room, and on the wall there's a board.
Yeah,
it says "Monitor all news for," and then you got obvious things like kidnappings, missing persons, alleged suicides, unsolved murders, and at number 5, thefts of sugar syrups, sweets, and unnatural things, alive or dead.
Incredible.
And this is what they're supposed to be looking out for, which probably gives you some indication of just how effective the ant hunt actually is to begin with.
Yes.
I.e. not very. They're looking in all the wrong places. But yeah, it's interesting. It starts as a police procedural.
It does. And
it starts with an incredible sequence, an extended sequence at the beginning where a couple of cops are out on patrol. They find a trashed house. They find a not comatose, but catatonic little girl who then is, sort of taken off to be examined, and gives us the title of the film.
Yeah.
They wave formic acid under her nose because they're beginning to suspect what's going on. And
that's right.
Brilliantly, she just screams, them, and goes and hides in the corner of the room. And it's absolutely... The whole extended opening sequence is magnificent.
It's incredible. I dare say it might be the most effective part of the film, actually, I think.
Oh, it is. I think eventually the 2 queen ants escape. This is no surprise. It's halfway through the film. They torch the nest. They find the nest and they destroy it. But 2 queen ants get out because they can fly, and they make it to Los Angeles and hide in the storm drains. I think it's less interesting when it gets to the city.
I think so. I think
it's much more interesting when it's out in the desert, which is very creepy, very eerie, very atmospheric.
Yeah, it's that first act is when it feels the most sort of gothic horror, actually, doesn't it? You've got the howling wind and that kind of abandoned, whatever it is. Is it like a gas station or something that's been like trashed? And
that's right.
You get this feeling of almost like a sort of ghost town where this kind of devastation has been wrought.
You get this feeling of people literally living on the edge.
Yeah.
The edge between us and nature.
Right.
And they're the sort of front line in this battle. It's an interesting film because, in fact, both of them straddle last year's season and this year's season. So they're sort of Nature Bites Back and Man-Made Monsters.
Completely. Yes.
So, they straddle them both.
Yeah.
But there is this feeling as well that we can only really battle the ants effectively once they're on our turf.
Yeah.
When they're out in the desert, we haven't got the faintest idea how to stop them.
No. Absolutely.
As soon as they arrive in Los Angeles, we start to get our act together because we're on familiar territory and we know how to put up a fight there. Mm-hmm. So I do like the opening, but I love it all, but I prefer the first half of the film where we're out in the desert and you're getting sort of weird noises and a wind that never stops.
Yes.
And, sort of things appearing over sand dune. It's marvellous. It's all good stuff.
It's so good, isn't it? So what do you think of it, the film generally? Do you remember how long it's been since you first discovered this film, Kev, when you first saw it? And what do you think of it generally?
It would have been on... BBC Two used to do series of science fiction films. And they did one in particular. I remember I saw an awful lot of my favourite science fiction films. And I think Them was part of that series.
Right.
And... yeah, I saw it, and I'd known about it for years because I'd got all the books. I've talked about this elsewhere that my parents weren't keen on me watching horror films, but they didn't seem to mind me having books about them, which is... I love my parents, but it's odd. Yeah. But I never quite got my head around it. But anyway, I had all the books, and there were these pictures of these giant ants, which to a young person like me who got a hyperactive imagination and was really into science fiction and horror... that just looked like the best film ever made. And then I saw it, and it wasn't far off. I thought, I thought it was terrific from the minute I saw it. It flies past. I watched it again last night, and I couldn't believe, sort of sitting there watching it, this is great. And then, when is it the end? Yeah. It's like, where the hell did that all go? I'm sure there was lots more going on in this film, but it's because the pace of it is so fast.
Absolutely, and these films are, and I do mean this as a compliment, they're quite slight, these movies, you know, and you know, some of them did make up one half of a double bill a lot of the time, and
that's
that kind
right,
of is how they feel almost, right? And I think it's such a pleasant surprise these days to watch a movie that is like 80 to 90 minutes long as well, right?
Oh, you know? Isn't it? Oh, tell you what, I do commentaries as well. Yeah. And me and my partner in commentary, Jonathan Rigby, we often sort of immediately message each other the minute we get offered something and say, it's only 79 minutes.
Yeah.
You're like, this is great. This is all we got to do, 79 minutes, because it's just so...
Yeah.
You can tell a story in 79 minutes, 80 minutes, 85, 90 minutes. You can tell a story in that will grip me, and I don't need much longer than that, to be honest. And as for it being slight, well, you know, very early on, in my sort of weird little way, I decided that if I wanted a message, I'd read a book.
Yeah.
You know, I'd read science fiction novels to get the big ideas and the big messages and stuff. If I wanted an hour and a half, maybe slightly less, of just pure, unadulterated entertainment, here comes them.
Absolutely. Perfect. I really enjoy this film too. I think the one thing I find about a lot of these movies is I wish, and I'm not expecting big meaty themes or anything like that necessarily, but I do wish sometimes that they had slightly more interesting characters than just... Yeah. FBI agents and military men and men standing in rooms talking about stuff in kind of very official ways. You know, sometimes I would love a bit more of a kind of, I don't know, just a bit more of an emotionally investable, kind of, to be emotionally invested in the characters a little bit more. Do you know what I mean? That's
a very long-winded way of saying they're all stereotypes.
They are.
And this is exactly what they are. Yeah. I mean, you know, you've got the no-nonsense cops, been represented here by James Whitmore's Sergeant Peterson and James Arnett's FBI agents, Graham.
Yeah.
You know, they're the sort of guys that would go in there, throw a punch, and then start questioning people. You know, they didn't mess about.
Exactly.
You've got even more no-nonsense military. You've got Onslow Stevens as General O'Brien and Sean McClory as Major Kibbe. You've got the slightly dotty old scientist who's there to explain what's going on, Edmund Gwenn as Dr. Medford. And boy, does he explain what's going on, because at one point he stops the whole film to show us another film about ants. So we get a complete science lecture in the middle of it. And then, of course, you know, there's the ever-suffering scientist's daughter, Joan Weldon as Pat Medford, who's really... She may be clever... She's an expert in, you know, sort of ants and all the rest of it. Very qualified, but really she's there to scream, be rescued, and have all the men lust after her.
Absolutely.
Remember what I said earlier about women know your place?
Yes, exactly.
This was their place.
She is literally the token woman of this film, isn't she?
She's the token woman. Yeah, they had to have a woman because, you know, we have to have women's interest, because, you know, the fact that, you know, women would be dragged to cinemas by their husbands and boyfriends against their will. I don't want to see this, you know, come on, you're coming with us. Was neither here nor there. They had to give them something, a little sort of a few crumbs, you know. Here's a girlie for you to look at, you know, and like, you know, and make sure you're like her when you go home. Scream a bit and fall over so your husband can rescue you, and all that kind of nonsense.
Exactly.
So they're ciphers. They're just object really to get the story moving.
That's right. And they talk to each other. The dialogue is very much explaining the story to each other, right? It's very much like, like you said, Kev, it's like, here's what we know about ants, or here's what's been going on in White Sands, or what do you think this means, or how are we going to defeat these ants? It's a lot of people talk in broad strokes to push the plot along, and then action happens, essentially, right?
Exactly. They are, and here it comes. Here comes my obligatory reference. They are all doctors' assistants from Doctor Who. The assistants are there to say, but I don't understand. So the Doctor can show how clever he is. And that's what these films are. You know, we don't understand what's going on. And the FBI men don't understand what's going on. So here's Edmund Gwenn being all, you know, slightly flustery, being a bit old and dippy, but he knows what he's talking about. So I'm going to stop the film and explain to you what's going on.
Exactly, yeah.
That's what they're there. They're sort of, they're less characters and more story plot points.
Completely.
And I don't mind that. Honestly, don't mind that. I really don't. Because to be perfectly honest, you know, if I was 18, 19, going to see them for the first time, even younger perhaps, I'm not going to see the characters.
Well, exactly.
I'm going to see the giant ants. The characters are there to be eaten by the giant ants. And, you know, the longer they stand around flapping their gums, the less interested I am. I just want to see the giant ants doing their thing.
Completely,
you know?
completely.
And that's what people wanted from these films, and that's what these films delivered.
They sure did, didn't they? They absolutely did. So what do you think of just the way... So this movie, directed by Gordon Douglas, what do you think of Gordon Douglas's direction, the way this movie looks? Because I believe it was initially conceived to be in 3D and in colour, right? And then they had to kind of roll all of that back eventually.
They did.
Right?
I think the only bit of it that really survives is that title sequence that you mentioned.
Yeah.
It's all in black and white, except this blood red title which flies at us out of the screen with the little trail block things.
That's right.
Behind the letters. So it was obviously meant to be in 3D.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of glad they didn't do it in 3D. Because, you know, 3D films from back then, even more so than today, were very, very reliant on someone waving something at you.
Yeah.
You get all these really annoying things, like, you know, House of Wax, which is a very famous 3D film, where you have people doing ping pong bat paddling things into the camera.
So
you know,
funny.
it's like it doesn't give any sense of depth, which is what I want from 3D. This would have been perfect for a film of depth.
Yeah.
To see, you know, those huge desert vistas in 3D.
Yeah.
But you just know that back then they would have waved mandibles in your face and, you know, sort of
absolutely.
all those machine guns that the police seem to have in the back of their cars, which is very disconcerting. But, you know, they'd have been waved in your face several times. So I'm glad they didn't do it. But what it does have, and it's quite interesting, is an almost documentary feel to it.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
It is kind of almost a sort of like, this is what happened.
Yeah.
We're doing a dramatic reconstruction of how it works.
Yes.
You know, and it does have a sort of you are there sort of feel to it.
Yeah, there's almost a bit kind of newsreely or something.
That's right.
Yeah.
Which is where the police procedural thing comes in, I think. By grounding it in a police procedural, it does feel as if it's actually happening.
Yeah.
Before all the weirdness comes in.
Absolutely. And I guess it does. This film particularly, we'll talk about how Tarantula maybe is slightly different, but this movie wears its themes on its sleeve, doesn't it? Like you said, it's very upfront about the fact that this is a result of nuclear testing in White Sands and the surrounding areas, essentially.
Yeah,
right?
It makes no bones about that whatsoever. It doesn't apologise for that. Certainly the military don't apologise for it. And I think filmmakers back there were in a kind of a difficult position when it came to that sort of thing. Because clearly people were very worried about this.
Yeah.
But the nuclear arsenal was the backbone of America's defence.
Of course. Yeah.
So were filmmakers going to actually come out and say, this is bad?
Yeah.
Because, you know, they may have felt that this was bad, but they would have risked an awful lot of pushback from people.
They could have ended up on the Hollywood blacklist or something at that point in time as well.
Exactly. So it was a very tricky thing to do. So they acknowledge it, but they're not judgmental about it.
No.
It's not sort of, you don't come away from it thinking, God, you know, sort of radiation and nuclear weapons are awful.
No, it's not like it's kind of saying, God, America have done a really bad thing by bombing other countries or whatever.
Yeah.
You know,
you get that with the more cynical 70s, I think.
Absolutely.
That's when that would start to creep in the 60s, but mainly in the 70s when it became incredibly paranoid.
Yeah.
We got those incredible paranoid thrillers that we were seeing throughout the 70s. Some of my favourite films, Parallax View and all the rest of it.
So good.
Terrific films. But in the 1950s, it was very much a sort of... We'd spoken earlier, didn't we, about the sort of the conservatism of 50s America, the conformity. And I think filmmakers, particularly filmmakers working for, you know, proper studios, were expected to conform.
Yeah.
So they weren't going to rock the nuclear boat, were they? They weren't going to come out and say, this is awful, we shouldn't have done it.
Totally.
You know.
And also, you know, they are trying to make money, essentially, as well. And I imagine the vast majority of audiences in kind of middle America and God knows where else are going to want to watch movies where it's like the Americans are the good guys and they're going to protect us. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The audiences back then weren't ready to be told that, you know, your leaders have let you down.
Exactly.
By the 70s, we'd seen enough of that, and particularly in America, I think they'd seen Vietnam, they'd seen Watergate, they'd seen all the rest of it. They were feeling let down, and I think, you know, the time was right then. In the 1950s, they'd won the Second World War.
Exactly.
And they were prosperous, and they were happy. They didn't want people coming along and getting political with them. They wanted a night out at the drive-in, and that's what they get. I mean, we could retrospectively put things on these films, but I don't think you can in this case, because I don't think there's anything there to put on. It's not judgmental.
Exactly, yeah. And it's a purely a fun, entertaining time at the movie theatre, isn't it?
Of course it is. Of course it is. Absolutely.
So eventually, we get that kind of creepy first act, that sort of ominous build-up of what's happened here, what's going on.
Yeah.
That incredible, astonishing first reveal of the giant ant kind of coming over the hill, right behind that woman. Phenomenal.
The first reveal is actually done by sound.
Yeah, it is.
We're cutting through all that keening wind that we get all the time. We get this incredible sound.
Yeah.
Which, as I understand it, was a mix of bird-voiced tree frogs, a wood thrush, a hooded warbler, and a red-bellied woodpecker.
Wow.
Which they layered one on top of the other, looped it, manipulated it, and that's what you're hearing. That's the sound of the ants.
Incredible.
And we don't see them for quite a while. We just hear this sound coming from somewhere out in the desert. View is a little bit obscured. The wind is whipping up sand, so there could be something lurking out there. We get to hear this absolutely incredible sound. The sound design got a Golden Reel Award from the Motion Picture Sound Editors for the best sound editing that year. And quite right too. It's an extraordinary noise.
Yes.
But then we finally see them.
Yes.
Now, some people are going to be disappointed in them. Not me, I have to say.
No.
For 1954, the effects were very good.
Do you know what? I think it's still quite effective when you see that massive one coming over the hill towards that woman.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when she screams at it and it's got their sort of big close-up of its face. The sort of flappy mandibles are a bit of a letdown, but they are quite crude. But I think by 1954 standards, these were amazing effects. We live in a sort of CGI-soaked age now where we can show anything we can imagine, and 9 times out of 10, I think we shouldn't.
Right, exactly.
Because, it's not very good CGI still. These ants, they may be a bit plasticky looking, and they may be slightly immobile, but they have real heft to them.
Absolutely. They feel like big, giant things, don't they? Like physical things. Yeah.
Because they were, and that's something you never, ever, ever get with CGI. There's a film called It Came from the Desert, 2017, with the CGI ants. And I don't know, I find that less convincing than I find the ants in this.
Yeah, completely.
You see them later lurking in their hives, in their nests, and they look really scary. It's all down to the beautiful lighting.
Yes.
They don't show too much. They're really clever. And I think, we have to ignore the obvious, that if an ant grew to that size, it wouldn't be able to do very much because its legs would just give way. Its legs would be disproportionately, it would. But, we don't worry about things like that. We let the squares worry about that. Or the mundanes, as we used to call them in science fiction. We let the mundanes worry about that. We don't care. We just want these giant ants to go on the rampage, and they do. There's a little bit of... You can see where the money didn't quite stretch.
Yes.
Where it's like, oh, yes, the queens have escaped and they've flown away.
Yes.
Hello, can we see them? Can we have a look? Yeah. And it's like, you get brief glimpses of these things, but a lot of the time they explain things to us that they've seen.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's, nowadays you might get complete overkill and there'd be like 1 million ants everywhere and they'd sort of be in your face the whole time. It kind of works for me. I still, I will make allowances for it because of the time it was made, because it still entertains me.
Absolutely.
What more do I want?
And I think you're right. I think the combination of the sort of the black and white and the lighting and the sound design all make up for maybe some of the shortcomings of the sort of what is it? It's not animatronic. It's kind of puppetry, right? It's just a giant kind of puppet.
They're giant, full-size puppets and puppet parts and so on. And there's a lot to be said, and I think modern filmmakers sometimes forget this, about the power of imagination for a viewer.
Yeah.
We can plug the gaps.
Yeah.
I mentioned this in the Hammer podcast. You will hear me say this again, so apologies for the almost immediate repeat, but I grew up watching Jerry Anderson TV shows.
Right.
So bits of string holding things up.
Yeah.
I didn't care. To my little mind, I didn't see them.
No.
I just saw Thunderbirds going out and doing their heroic rescues. And it's the same with these ants. You know, if you switch off that sort of grown-up critical bit.
Yeah,
my mantra has always been, don't grow up. It's not a good idea. Don't be a grown-up, because when you're a grown-up, you sit there and moan about they don't look very realistic, do they? If you can tap into that little kid or even the teenager who saw this film for the first time, they're the ones that still love this stuff, and they don't care about, you know, the effects not looking so good. Who cares? Who cares? They're giant ants and they're great. Who cares?
I agree. They were painted apparently a sort of purplish green colour.
That's right. Yes, better to show up on black and white film.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
There is a theory some guys put forward, forgive me, I can't remember his name now, where he said that ants are usually red and they're rampaging around in America trying to destroy American way of life, so therefore it's an allegory for communism. It's interesting, but I don't buy it, to be honest.
No.
I don't buy it. They are just giant ants on the rampage. That's really all they are.
Now it's time to thank our sponsor for this episode, NordVPN. This season, we are going to be talking quite a lot about the dangers and perils of technology, particularly the online world. So it feels like a perfect time to sign up to NordVPN, the best way to protect your online private data, like your bank details, your passwords, and your online identity. I get to travel a lot with my job, and I find NordVPN super useful. It's good to have on when I'm using my laptop in a public place. NordVPN protects all of my data when I'm on public Wi-Fi in a coffee shop or a library. It's also super useful when you need to access films or TV shows that are only available in other regions. So when I was in the US recently, I switched on NordVPN, switched my region to the UK, so I had a choice of accessing the Shudder back catalogue in the UK and the US. Super useful, especially when trying to find the films that we're going to be covering this season. You get premium cybersecurity for literally the price of a cup of coffee per month, and one NordVPN account can be used on 10 different devices. We are offering some exclusive discounts, so to get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, head to nordvpn.com/evolution of horror. This link will give you 4 free extra months on a 2-year plan, and there's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. That's nordvpn.com/evolution of horror, and we'll list the link in the show notes. Why do you think they went with ants specifically, not spiders, not rats, you know, whatever else? Is there something specifically about ants, do you think?
It's a good question, because most ants, they're more of an irritant than something scary.
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of completely harmless, aren't they, really, ants, for the most part?
They're mainly there just to mess up your picnic.
Absolutely.
That's the worst that happens. And I don't know, it's a really weird one. We had a couple more. We had Empire of the Ants in 1977, which I think is a far less effective film than them, to be honest, even though it's like 20 years later. And we sort of, it came from the desert, which we mentioned earlier. They sort of work a little bit better when they're large, when they're oversized. That said, if you haven't seen Byron Haskin's The Naked Jungle from 1954, that at one point features Charlton Heston, no less, battling what is described as a 30-mile-wide colony of marabunta.
Oh, wow.
A particular strain of army ants. And so, you know, that when they're in great numbers, they can be scary.
Absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
As we've established many times in my Evolution of Horror career, I'm a complete wuss and I'm terrified of everything. Ants, not so much. It's just, ants are just there. They just do whatever they were put here for. They just do whatever.
Well, they're quite amazing to watch, aren't they? The way in which they sort of walk in formation. It's funny. We often use the term army of ants and that kind of thing. There is something almost militant about ants, isn't there? The way in which they work as a group, they walk in single file, they carry stuff. I believe as well the ant, and I remember this from my Nature Bites Back days of talking about animals last year, but I think the ant is considered the strongest animal in the world, sort of pound for pound, like relatively speaking, right? So I suppose there is that quite scary idea that if you did come across a giant ant, it would be unbeatable, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. Which you don't really get from this film because I don't think the budget would have allowed them to be sort of upending cars and all the rest of it, you know. But there's a film called The Black Scorpion, which is an almost exact remake of them, but with scorpions, and they were using stop motion animation, so they could do all that.
Yeah.
Whereas here, you don't really get that sense, but they are fascinating creatures.
They are
extraordinary. When you see a documentary about ants and the way they live, and it's like, I'm sounding like an old man, aren't I? But you see the way they sort of build their hives, and they've got this very regimented society built around the queen.
Amazing.
And
yeah,
they are incredible creatures. Whether they're scary or not.
No. If anything, do you know what I hate though? Worst day of the year, Kev, is Flying Ants Day.
Flying ants,
oh,
yeah.
God.
Yeah.
Horrible. Horrible.
They're a little bit more scary because that shouldn't happen.
Yes.
Ants are these things that crawl around on your sandwiches at a picnic. They're not supposed to suddenly sprout wings and take off.
No.
Then they become a little bit more worrying.
It's horrible. Yeah. It's the way they kind of you get hundreds of them together, don't you? As well when they're
That's
flying.
right. Yeah, they go in swarms, don't they?
I remember as a kid, my dad. I mean, harsh actually, but my dad going out into the garden with the boiled kettle and just singing to them all in the garden. You know,
that was a big thing for my generation as well. You know, sort of like ant season. Take boiling water out and pour it down their nest. Even then,
horrific.
I was thinking, what have they done?
I know. I know.
Why are you doing that? But it was just a thing people did back then. You know,
absolutely.
I suppose if you've got ants in your house, you might be thinking, torture the little buggers. But I quite like ants. I just don't find them terribly frightening, to be honest.
Absolutely. So you mentioned this already, but how do you find the way the action progresses into the second half, where we do get the action moves to the city, doesn't it? And you get more, and I suppose it becomes a little bit more claustrophobic and less kind of out in the desert.
But it's one of the first times we really get to see the Los Angeles storm drains on screen, which in itself is a really interesting development.
Yeah, that's true.
Those scenes in the tunnels where they're trying to find the kids that have gone down there, those are really claustrophobic, atmospheric, really tense. They're really good.
Really good.
I do miss the sort of the haunting qualities of the first half.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course you do, but it has its own charms, the second half. You know, there's, like I say, the fact that we have to bring the battle onto our territory before we can beat them, I think is quite a sort of potent message.
Absolutely.
From this film. You know, we can't take on nature in her territory. We can only take on nature when we've lured it into our or when it's strayed in.
Yeah.
You know,
we'll sort this out in Los Angeles, the greatest city in the world, according to the film industry. You know,
and of course, so the film industry was based in Los Angeles, still is, and so this existential threat from television was now suddenly being taken over by this existential threat by giant flying ants.
That's right.
So
that's right.
You know,
I mean, I grew up on that really silly film in the mid-90s, Volcano, where they discovered that there was hot lava running through the sewers of LA, underneath LA.
I love that film through sheer stupidity. All the years that people have lived in Los Angeles and no one noticed the volcano.
Incredible. Yeah, but I agree with you. I think some of those scenes in the tunnels are quite effective in that they are claustrophobic, and and those moments when you hear that sound design before one of them kind of suddenly emerges through a tunnel or whatever.
That's right. And the fact that they're smart enough to have figured out that they don't have to tunnel their own nests, they can just go and use the ones that we very conveniently laid on for them.
Yeah, exactly.
We are again hoist by our own petard, aren't we? We've actually built a nest,
a tunnelling system, exactly.
A tunnelling system for them, and the ants aren't stupid. They're not going to overdo their exercise if they can get away with just using the tunnels we gave them. Thank you very much.
That's right.
So
we get some goods, and I noticed that there is one shot that looks like it was made for 3D towards the end there, which is where they're sort of flamethrowering the ants, and the flamethrower comes at us, doesn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. So you get the full range of military hardware of the time, except for the nuclear bombs. So you get all sorts of like handguns, machine guns, flamethrowers. So if they could have got aircraft down those tunnels, they'd have had an airstrike, wouldn't they? But
exactly.
It's very exciting. Actually, the climax is very exciting.
Although I must say, it slightly took me out of any moment when a person was killed by an ant because of the Wilhelm scream. There was a lot of Wilhelm scream going on in this movie, wasn't there?
There is, isn't there? For those who don't know the Wilhelm scream, you do.
Yes.
You do know the Wilhelm scream, you just don't know it yet. It was originally done for a Western, the title of which eludes me at the moment.
Hang on. on, I think I've got it to hand. And actually, I made a video essay for the BBC about history of the Wilhelm scream.
I meant to watch it last night, but I thought, it's 3 lots of Muncer in 1 week. No chance.
No, you don't want that. You don't want that. Distant Drums was the name of the first film, and I think that was 1951. So it was only a couple of years before.
Exactly.
This. Yeah.
And it was a character called Wilhelm.
Yes.
Who has that very distinctive scream. He kind of drops to a couple of octaves.
Yeah.
And they liked it so much, they just put it in a library somewhere. And then years later, it was Ben Burt, wasn't it, who discovered it? It had sort of fallen out of fashion. So he puts it in the Star Wars films, in the Indiana Jones films.
That's right.
And now you can't turn your television on without hearing a Wilhelm scream. There's even a documentary about the Wilhelm scream.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it is kind of odd now. I mean, back then they wouldn't have noticed it, wouldn't have cared. But now we watch it and we ask it, they go, oh, this is really great. Oh, the Wilhelm scream. Oh, no, this is really great. It's really great. So just for that split second, you are sort of torn away. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't help it. You can't, but also it always makes me sort of chuckle too. It makes me smile hearing the Wilhelm scream.
Of course. It's very comforting in a strange sort of way.
It is, isn't it? It is. I guess because we associate it with Lucas, Spielberg, those sorts of filmmakers.
That's right. Because of cozier filmmaking. Yeah.
So what was the... And again, also, I love, by the way, it gets in and gets out. As soon as we flamethrow those ants, credits roll. Done.
But not before we get
not before
one
the
line
message.
of dialogue. The message, which actually should be the motto for this entire series. And it's Dr. Medford. He's seen the chaos that's caused, the death of all these ants. And he says, when man entered the atomic age, he opened a door into a new world. What we'll eventually find in that new world, nobody can predict.
There you go.
And that should be the mantra for this entire series.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. And like you say, that's it. It then just stops. We don't see them wearily making their way back to the surface because who cares?
Who cares? No.
They've killed the ants. The threat is over. Bring on the next film in the double bill, please.
Phenomenal stuff.
Which is great. I love that. It's wonderful.
I've got a random question for you, Kev, not really related to this, but I was thinking about it and I thought, I wonder if Kevin Lyons will know this fact. Because again, the thing about that is, back in the 1950s, you also get an end board that says the end, and then that's the end of the film, right?
That's right.
At what point did films start flipping that round so that you would get a short title card at the beginning of the film and then a long scrolling end credits sequence?
It's a good question. It drives me insane because one of the things I do for my website and for my day job is something called frame grabbing, where we go to take shots of the credit sequences. I live such an exciting life. You would not believe how exciting my life is. But I take sort of screenshots of the credit sequences so that we can use them for databases and websites and so on.
Right.
And yeah, there was a time when you get all the information at the front of the film, and then you get a repeat of the cast at the end, and that was it. But then, I remember in 1978 and people saying Superman had got 500 credits.
Yes.
We'll never see the likes of that again.
Yeah,
that's a short set of credits today.
Oh my God, they're ridiculous
Madness.
These days, aren't they? It is around the 70s, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
I'm trying to think, because obviously Star Wars was a biggie where it just has a title card at the beginning and that's
Star Wars, actually, Lucas got into trouble for that, so that might have been one of the first, because it was a standard practice that you put your key, what they call above the line credits at the start of the film. And in fact, if I remember the story correctly, and people will correct me, I'm sure, it's the reason why he left the Directors Guild.
Ah, there you go.
Because they were trying to fine him for not putting all the crew members at the start of the film, or anybody at the start of the film, and that was the standard practice.
Yeah.
And he said, no, I just want to get into the story. I want to get on with the film. And I think that may have been the first one that the Directors Guild noticed, certainly.
Yes. I think it was probably Star Wars that popularised it, right? That idea of, we're not going to give you the name of the director, the stars, nobody. It's just title, bang, and we get straight into it.
And get straight into it. And I found one the other day, and I can't remember what it was, something I was doing for the day job, that... I spent ages looking. I was a Samuel L. Jackson film on Netflix, a kind of a ghost story.
Yeah.
What was it called? Can't remember. It'll come back to me. It doesn't matter. I was looking for the title card.
Yeah.
Because, if you're a filmographer, the title card is vital because it's exactly how it should be on any database or website. I couldn't find it. I thought, to hell with it. I'm not wasting any more time. I'll just frame grab the end credits and just make a no title card. Guess where the title card was?
The end credit.
The very last shot of the film. Which, in a way, kind of makes sense, because if you're on Netflix, I'm not entirely sure you need to be reminded what film you've just started.
No, that's true. Good point. Yeah, good point.
Because it's there. It's there on the screen before you actually start doing it. It's bloody annoying for people like me. It's even more annoying for people like me. It's when filmmakers decide they're going to get artistic with their title sequence.
Oh, yeah.
And it can run for like 20 minutes scattered throughout the beginning.
Yeah.
Just tell me who you are and what the film's called, then sod off and get on with the story. I'm not interested in all this.
Yeah, absolutely. I watched The Long Walk this week, and that has one of those... I think it's about 25 minutes into the runtime when the title The Long Walk comes up.
Well, Mandy is halfway through, isn't it?
Yes.
Before the word Mandy appears on the screen. And when I was asked to frame grab that for work, and I was sitting there like, where the hell is it?
Well,
it was only when I watched it later on. Oh, you buggers, there it is, right in the middle of the film. Yeah.
Exactly. So there you go. I mean, I'm sure people will write in and tell me, but when did that happen? When did we stop getting the end card?
Is it Star Wars? I suspect it might be. So let us know if you know anything different. Yeah.
Exactly. But there you go. So what was the reaction to it at the time, Kev, kind of critically and commercially?
It did very well.
Successful.
It did very well. Of course it did very well. It's a terrific film. And the critics were generally... They were quite kind to me. Variety called it a top-notch science fiction shocker.
Excellent. Yeah.
And other critics were, a few were a bit sniffy, but then they always were. And it's only really been probably the last 20 years or so that science fiction and horror films started to get the respect.
Yeah.
There were even some sort of sniffy comments about Star Wars.
Yeah, of course.
Most people liked it, but there were some sniffy comments. And nowadays, I think critics, because they've grown up with these films, are much more lenient and more understanding.
Absolutely.
Back then, they hadn't got a clue what to make of them. I think they were baffled most of the time. And when people are baffled, they tend to round on whatever it is that's baffling them.
Yes.
Take it out on them. But it got reasonably good notices, mostly positive, and... Yeah, I think it was the 51st most successful film at the US box office that year, which is not bad.
Not bad.
For a tiny little film about giant ants.
Yeah.
It held its own against some big hitters that year. So, yeah, fair play to it. Well done.
And so is this the movie that is kind of considered the one that sort of started this idea of the atomic monster? Is this one of the first biggies?
I think The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms might have more of a claim to that. If I remember right, that's an irradiated monster. But I think this is the one that sort of... This created a blueprint from which others... were made. The Black Scorpion, a film we'll talk about in a moment as well. It's a separate film. This is the one that sort of established what they should look like. You can't afford a giant monster. You can't afford stop-motion animation. You can afford to do a monster film. Yeah. Here you go. This is how you do it.
Yeah.
And I think it pointed the way towards... a lot of lesser films, perhaps, over time. So.
Yeah, we got a lot of them after this, didn't we? After the success of them.
Didn't we just? Yes, didn't we just? And, they can be a lot of fun, but they're not them.
No, absolutely. I think of that amazing line from Ed Wood where the Bela Lugosi character says, giant bugs, talks about 50s horror. Now no one cares about Bela anymore because of giant bugs,
Don't want the classic horror films anymore. Today, it's all giant bugs. Giant spiders, giant grasshoppers. Who would believe such nonsense?
The old ones were much spookier. They had castles, full moons.
They were mythic.
Can I just throw in one tiny bit of trivia?
Please.
Because, I live for trivia, as you know, and I wanted to throw in one little bit. Around 54 minutes into the film...
Yeah.
Keep your eyes open. There's a young chap in uniform that wanders across screen, takes out a piece of paper from a telegraph and takes it over to a young woman at a desk. And that young chap was 23 years old, and his name was Leonard Nimoy.
Oh, no way!
The future Mr. Spock turns up very briefly in them. So next time you watch it, 54 minutes in, once you know it's him, unmistakable. As soon as he turns into profile, you expect the ears.
Yeah.
And of course, he's a long way away from that yet. But yeah, there he is. He's in them.
Oh, incredible. Well, as far as I'm concerned, any film deserves an extra star if it's got Leonard Nimoy in it,
Oh, of course. And we're going to have a really good cameo in this next film as well, of course.
Excellent. So, there you go. All right. Well, let's jump forward 1 year to 1955 and talk about Tarantula. No, I'm sad there's no exclamation mark here, Kev, for Tarantula.
I know.
Yeah.
It loses points for lots of reasons for me, Tarantula. I think it's not as good as them.
Yeah.
But it loses big points for not having either a question mark or an exclamation mark, something to just.
We need some punctuation. Absolutely.
We need some punctuation. Yeah, exactly.
Even science was stunned. The new atomic miracle should have been mankind's greatest boon. Instead, when such power to cause phenomenal growth proved dangerously unstable, man was confronted with his most shocking blunder.
The isotope triggered our nutrient into a nightmare.
A blunder that transformed a tiny insect into the 100-foot spider that was now ravaging the panic-stricken countryside.
Okay, we're in Desert Rock, Arizona, another of those windswept desert towns. And this is the home of Professor Gerald Deemer, played by Leo G. Carroll. He's been experimenting with this growth nutrients that he's been feeding to his little menagerie of animals, which causes extreme growth in them.
Yeah.
But his assistant, Jacobs, has decided he's going to test it on himself.
Yes.
And the first thing we see, very similar to them, is a scene in the desert, and he's crawling through the desert. Obviously in great pain, he's obviously dying. And it's because he's mutated into this something else. Originally, they keep saying it's acromegalia instead of acromegaly, which is, birth condition. That's what they think it is until they realise, actually, this is being created artificially by this scientist by accident. He's not done this deliberately. And one of the things he's been feeding this growth hormone to, because this is where scientists are a little bit stupid. We've got this growth hormone. What am I going to test it on? Let's test it on a tarantula.
Yeah.
Because what could possibly go wrong? And what goes wrong is that one of his victims comes back to the house, trashes it. The tarantula gets away. It's already quite large. By the end of the film, it's grown into a massive, huge brute of a beast.
Yeah.
Which we don't see anywhere near as much as I would like,
right.
To be fair.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. So it sounds as though you don't like this film as much as them, Kev, by the sounds of it.
I don't. It's an okay film.
Yeah.
And when I watched it again last night, I enjoyed watching it.
Yes.
But if you were to say to me, right, Kev, you've got to watch one of these films tonight to do a little bit extra on, it would be them.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be Tarantula.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah.
I think it has a lot of problems, one of which is that it spends an awful lot of time with this acromegaly plot.
Yes, it does.
Which I'm just not interested in. The tarantula gets away and then it goes missing for half the film. It finally comes into life when we finally get the final act and the monster is on the rampage.
Yes.
And that's when it finally becomes a monster film that the title is promising us.
That is true. That is very true.
Yeah.
I will say, this was the first time I'd watched this one, and I will say I found it more effective visually than them, actually. And maybe that is because they use a different technique with this. And the fact that it looks like a genuine spider coming at people, I think, and the fact that a tarantula is just scarier than an ant, let's be honest. I think
oh, God. Oh, yeah.
I think for that reason, I actually found it more effective in those scenes of kind of monster attack moments. But you're right, those moments take a while to get there, and they are few and far between. That is true.
They take a while to get going in them, but once they happen a lot.
Yes.
Which is how a monster film should be. You shouldn't throw it in. I was going to say you shouldn't throw it in right at the start, but Godzilla -1 did, and that was a masterpiece. So, but generally you shouldn't show us a monster too early, but when you do start to show it to us, we want to see a lot of it.
Yeah.
I've come to see a film about a tarantula because the film is called Tarantula. If you'd called it acromegaly, I may not have turned up. But, I expected more monster, I think, which is, it's not bad. It's a Jack Arnold film. Great director. It was never going to be bad.
Yeah.
But it's just disappointing. And particularly watching them back to back, and Tarantula, you can see the shortcomings in Tarantula much more clearly, I think.
And you can probably also see the influence too, right? I mean, how much is this film just a product, do you think, of the success of them 1 year earlier?
Oh, I think he definitely owes something to it. Almost to the point where I wonder if what they'd originally wanted to do was make a film about this mad scientist mutating people.
Yeah. And then they said, add a giant bug. Yeah.
Stick a spider in it. Yeah. And that's why we don't see the spider as much, because, but I think it does owe quite a bit to them. You've got the desert setting, the small town setting. There's the procedural part at the beginning of the film where nobody's quite sure what's going on. They're treating it like it's a natural series of events until they realise what's going on. Of course, you've got a giant monster, of course. And, we even get... halfway through, you'll be delighted to hear this, dear listeners. Halfway through, they whip out an 8mm cine film projector and give us another bloody science lecture. He's like, we've just had one in them. We don't need another one from you. Thank you very much. I know,
that is really funny. Although, I was quite impressed at I think just the fact that tarantulas are such creepy animals.
Oh, yeah.
Those moments, I was like, oh my God, what's he going to do to the snake? Is the snake going to kill the tarantula?
Yes.
I don't know,
There's like documentary footage of a tarantula taking on a rattlesnake.
Oh my God, yeah.
You think, wow, that's brave and really quite scary. Would it be more scary if we'd then seen a giant snake taking on the giant tarantula? That would have been brilliant.
That would have been good. That would have been. And the thing is as well that we all know that spiders, including tarantulas, and I think they even mention in the dialogue, tarantulas can move quite fast.
Oh, can't they just? Yeah.
The problem is with this is that the tarantula approaches very slowly every time we see it, doesn't it?
It looks like it's been drugged most of the time. It looks like it's just woken up from a narcotic slumber. It's like, let's stagger about over here. If it was rushing about...
Yes.
But then could they have sold that as a visual? Because it may have looked a bit silly. Things move slowly because that implies size and bulk and weight.
Yes.
But yeah, I get what you mean. Had you had a little scuttle occasionally, like we see spiders do, that would have been perhaps more effective.
Well, it's just got that classic kind of 50s monster movie thing of the music going dun 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 dun.
Yeah.
And it goes on for about 10 minutes dun, 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 as this tarantula kind of slowly approaches a house,
All the humans are listening to techno, the spiders are chilling out on ambient, and it's just like there's a bit of a mismatch in there somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, let's start off by talking about Jack Arnold then, the director. You mentioned he was a good sort of established director in this world, wasn't he? Because he had even directed a Universal monster movie.
He'd done a couple, in fact. He had his sort of reputation for making horror and science fiction films set in desert towns.
Right.
It's a bit unfair because really there's only this. It came from outer space and the Space Children, which came later.
Yes.
They're the only ones that are really set in deserts. But yes, he'd done Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Which is a beautiful looking film, isn't it? Unbelievable.
Gorgeous film.
Yeah.
And, he did Revenge of the Creature.
Yes.
Which is perhaps more in line with Tarantula because that's the monster rampaging through civilization in air quotes.
Yeah.
Whereas, sort of the creature is out in the jungle somewhere, But yeah, and he made a whole load of films. He came back to giant spiders.
Yes.
Eventually, because he did that absolute classic, The Incredible Shrinking Man.
Oh, yeah.
In which he takes on a giant spider. And which isn't a giant spider at all. It's just a normal-sized spider. It's just that when you're an incredible shrinking man, everything's a giant, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
So he was a great director. He had a really good way with atmosphere. He could take very unpromising-looking locations and make them seem very scary, very creepy. And I think he's helped very much here by George Robinson, who is his cinematographer.
Right.
And this is a man, again, with links to the classic Universal monster movies. I'll read a few of them off. Just listen to what he shot. The Invisible Ray, Dracula's Daughter, Son of Frankenstein, The Mummy's Tomb, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, Son of Dracula. He liked to keep it in the family, obviously.
Yeah.
House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula. He knew what he was doing, this guy.
Yeah.
And you can see that. The photography here, I think, is even better than it is in them.
Yeah.
And some gorgeous photography in this film. Beautiful lighting.
Yes, completely. It looks gorgeous, doesn't it? And this is, of course, this is made by Universal Pictures. So I guess you could in some way say that this is a Universal monster movie, right? In a way.
You will find it in some Universal monster books.
Yeah, which is interesting.
I'm quite right too.
Yeah, do you think it does?
Yeah.
Do you think it shares any DNA with the Universal monster movies?
Probably not, because I think it's doing something different.
Yeah.
Whereas the classic monster movies are more gothic. They do come into the modern age eventually. This is very modern.
Yeah.
Because, although I'm going to bring this up because you've glossed over it and haven't mentioned it, but I'm going to bring it up. We're calling this Atomic Monsters, and this has got absolutely soddle to do with Atomic Monster. He's not an atomic monster, but he is a mad scientist.
Well,
so it
exactly.
conforms to the tropes of the atomic monster genre. And so it's very much more in line with what's going on around it than it is with what was going on in the past.
Yes.
And in some ways, that's how it should have been.
Completely.
Been,
And I suppose that's it. I mean, this is it's a man-made monster movie in that it is about a mad scientist who creates these giant beasts. However, and you're right, it's not Atomic Monster, but it definitely feels like, I guess we've talked about this a lot together, Kev, over the years. You know, that idea of like, a zombie movie doesn't necessarily have to have a zombie in it anymore.
Exactly.
This is feels very much like it's following the tropes of the Atomic Monster movie, right? We've got a giant bug rampaging the desert, except that it's not technically an atomic monster, I suppose.
Everybody knew what it was.
Yeah.
They all knew what it was. It's just, they decided to do something slightly different. Possibly, in fact, because this again, I'm putting my trivia hat on, so if you don't like trivia, now's the time to go and make a cup of tea, but I think this is quite nice. It's actually based on a television episode. Science Fiction Theatre, which had actually only been broadcast in May 1955.
Oh, wow.
An episode called No Food for Thought, which is about a scientist who creates a food supply that causes problems. It doesn't have a giant tarantula in it, which makes me again wonder, did they intend, for this to be the way it was? The script for Tarantula was written by Robert M. Fresco and Martin Barclay, and Fresco had written the script for this TV episode, which was directed by this guy called Jack Arnold. So he'd already had a kind of dry run with it before taking it to the big screen.
That's interesting. That's really interesting.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. And it adds to my suspicion that maybe the tarantula was a bit of an afterthought.
Right. I think that's probably true. And I think there's something about this as well that's not really... It's less kind of wagging its finger almost, isn't it? It's... I guess, this was a kind of accidental consequence of something that was kind of well-intentioned by this scientist, wasn't it?
Yeah, Dima had his heart in the right place. He just wasn't keeping an eye on his health and safety checks.
Yeah,
and so it got out of hand. And in fact, even the fact that the tarantula escapes wasn't something that he did.
No.
That wasn't his fault. What he would have done with the tarantula when it finally reached that size, if it was still in his house, is a question that the film doesn't even ask, let alone try to answer. But, we can gloss over that. We can just gloss over that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's interesting as well, because, I think the setup led me to believe that Dima was going to be a sort of villain, right? I mean, like, he is at the beginning, his face is mutating, and
that's right.
He is kind of framed and scored. That moment when he comes down the stairs towards the character of Steve while she's on the phone. He's turning into a monster. He's going to be the villain, and then actually, you then get the reveal that he's this quite remorseful, sympathetic character with well-intentioned. Yeah,
beautifully judged performance by Leo G. Carroll.
Yeah,
who I think is a very underrated actor.
Yeah, very.
I think he should be much more highly praised than he is. He's a terrific actor, and he has a lovely little speech, doesn't he, about how we could have ended world hunger.
Yes,
we could have set everything right, but now everything's been trashed, and there's a giant spider on the loose, and it's all gone to hell, and it's just so sad. It really is quite a tragic figure in that moment. Not at all the monster that we expect him to be.
Exactly.
He's not one of those guys sort of toiling away in a dungeon with Kenneth Strickfaden devices and sort of bubbling vats of whatever.
Right.
He's a well-meaning scientist, which automatically means, of course, as we said earlier, that we shouldn't trust him.
Exactly.
Because I think he even wears a lab coat, doesn't he? So, good God, is there any more indicator of shiftiness in 50s American films? But it's not his fault, I don't think. Not totally.
No.
Not totally.
Absolutely. But again, the cast of characters is the kind of similar thing to what we've come to expect in this sort of subgenre, right? We've got Dr. Matt Hastings, we've got Professor Gerald Deemer, they are policemen, they're doctors, they're professionals, are men in figures of authority, most of them, and Mara Corday as your token woman, Stephanie, as well. Right?
There's a wonderful giveaway line, isn't there, when she's being driven up to the house by John Agar, who's a bit of a sort of regular of these films. He says, "Give women the vote, and what do you get? Lady scientists."
Exactly.
And I think he's trying to be light-hearted.
That's right. That's right. They're sort of almost flirting, right, at this point.
They are almost flirting, but really, mate, honestly, I'm not very good at that sort of thing at all, but I would know better than to lead with that, frankly. My favourite character in it, strangely enough, is Josh, the hotel receptionist.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Played by the very, very good character actor Hank Patterson. Mainly was in westerns, as you can probably tell from the performance in this.
Yeah.
But he's really funny
really
in this.
funny.
When Stephanie Clayton, she calls herself Steve, which is, I think, terrific. It's really good. When she sort of like goes in and she's trying to get help, and he's not at all helpful, but he's very, very funny with her.
Yeah, that's right. He just sort of says, well, I'm afraid you're going to have to sit and wait for 3 hours or whatever it is.
Yeah,
right?
And you know that bit where John Agar's character comes in and offers to take her up there, and he said, "Are you not going to introduce yourselves?" And they just look at each other and go, "No."
No. I know, incredible.
Terrific.
Really funny. Yeah, I did appreciate that, a few kind of fun character moments in this. And the cast are all pretty good. And, is this a chance for you to roll out some trivia about a cameo, Kev, in this?
Well, actually, my
movie?
favourite actor in the entire film's only in it for about 2 seconds. But
yes.
right at the end, little uncredited cameo, you see an Air Force pilot leading the attack, leading the airstrike. And he's got his sort of, oxygen mask on, so you don't see his whole face, but those eyes and that voice, absolutely unmistakable. It's Clint Eastwood.
There you go.
Who that same year would be in Revenge of the Creature for Jack Arnold. So Jack Arnold obviously likes it. But yeah, there he is, looking about 12 years old in an Air Force pilot's mask and everything. And immediately stealing the show.
Yes.
He gets like 2 lines of dialogue. You're immediately thinking, that man is a star in the making.
He's got it's in his eyes, isn't it?
It's in his eyes.
Oh, yeah.
I remember seeing on QI Stephen Fry talking about how he'd spoken to a stuntman in Hollywood who said that Clint Eastwood was amazing because one of the tricks he did with his eyes, whenever he fired a gun, he didn't blink.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Watch out for that. Once you know that's true, he doesn't. Everybody else is like, and cringing away from the gun when they're firing it because they're not used to it.
God.
Clint Eastwood, bang, 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 didn't blink once.
Oh, I love that.
Incredible.
There you go.
We're going to have to do a whole series on Clint Eastwood, man. We've got to do it. What a star. What a star.
Does that mean I have to sit through westerns? Because I don't like westerns, Kev. So.
Oh, I'll do those. Don't worry.
Okay.
I love those. So.
I'll do Play Misty for me. That's fine. I'll
there
do
you
that
go.
one.
Yeah, perfect. Perfect.
Well, let's talk about the effects, the special effects in this, and the way in which these bugs or this bug is realised on screen compared to them.
Yeah.
How do you find the effects and the way that spider is brought to life here?
Well, interestingly, when I first started taking my notes, before I'd watched it last night, I was, taking notes on it, and you'd said, let's talk about the effects, and I thought, okay, the effects are rubbish, they don't work. But then when I watched it again, I thought, no, that's not fair.
No, they're pretty good.
They do work.
Yeah.
They do work.
Yeah.
You can tell that it's a normal spider superimposed on the action.
So that's it, right? So it's not a practical thing like with them. This is a superimposition.
There's some practical stuff when you get close-ups of hairy legs popping in and out of
and the two kind of little sort of whatever they are, the fangs. Yeah.
They've got a proper word though, but we'll call them fangs.
Yes.
Because I can't remember what it is. But I think I was being a bit unfair on the effects. They're actually perfectly good.
They are.
They're perfectly fine. It's all about effects. Are just all about selling an illusion.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you can sell that illusion, like I said, I never cared about strings holding up the Tracy family in Thunderbirds. I don't really care. There's a bit of fringing on this spider because the illusion works.
Absolutely.
And that's all that matters. So I think... Yeah, I'm looking at my notes now, and I've still got them. They say they're far less effective. But having watched it and not changed my notes, they're actually very effective. I think they're very good.
I think they're all right.
You get a sense of
Yeah.
You get a sense of scale.
You do get a sense of scale. And I think, again, I suppose a lot comes down to the fact that a tarantula is just a scary-looking thing. Like, it is...
Yeah.
You know, tarantulas are horrible, aren't they? I mean, no offence to them. Obviously, they're lovely creatures. All creatures are lovely.
They are.
But you know, people are inherently unnerved by spiders anyway, of course. And when you've got like a big hairy one, there is something about it, like, and you can literally see its fangs as well with the tarantula. You know?
I always tell people that I'm not that bothered by spiders. Not like, you know, we've been through this on this podcast a million times before, me and rodents.
Yes.
We all know that, you know, I'm 6'6" and I'm terrified of a 2-inch rodent, you know. And I scream like a girl when it happens, but, you know. But spiders... There is something very odd about spiders, something very wrong about them. Nothing in nature should have that many legs and that many eyes. No. It's just not right. And I think I've mentioned before on this podcast, maybe elsewhere, that one of the great things about the face hugger in Alien is that it looks like a spider.
Yes, absolutely.
With a rat's tail.
Absolutely.
So you're kind of combining all these fears into one creature. And yet it shouldn't have those legs. It shouldn't move the way it does. I'm quite happy if I looked up and saw one on the wall.
Yeah.
I'd jump, oh, that's fine. And I'd carry on working because it wouldn't bother me.
Yeah, of course.
If I then looked up and it had gone...
Yes, exactly.
I need to know where it is. I need to go and find it. And just as long as I know where it is, I'm happy with it. But they are very odd creatures. And I totally get, although I'm not arachnophobic as such, I totally get why people are.
Yeah.
Because they're just, and you know, so I've had friends and people I've known who have pet tarantulas.
Yeah.
And it took a little while to get them to put it on my hand, and they're not at all what you think they're going to be. They're very soft. They're very relaxed. They're very chill around human beings.
Yeah,
you know?
Well, they've got nothing to be afraid of, have they? That's the thing.
Well, no. When they look through those 8 eyes and see all those cowering humans in the corner of the room, thinking, "This is what I can do to them," you know, I've got nothing to worry about.
Exactly. Yeah, I know. So I think, and absolutely. And there's something, and again, I talked about this to death last season, so I won't go on about it. But there is something uncanny about the way they move.
Yeah.
It's not like, what's the word? It's like hydraulic almost, but the way in which their limbs move is not like the way human limbs move.
The limbs sort of move independently of each other in a way that we can't even begin to imagine because we don't have that many limbs. It doesn't make any sense to us.
Exactly.
You know, locomotion is what we do, with one foot in front of the other. And they've got this kind of almost like a rolling motion with their legs. And it is so weird. It's so uncanny. Fascinating, but really weird.
So
really
using
odd.
actual footage of a real spider in this instance does work in its favour, because no matter how ropey that superimposition might look, actually just seeing a tarantula on screen that big coming across the desert still looks, I think, quite effective.
Still looks good. And look, I've seen the giant spider invasion, which is a Volkswagen Beetle with a bloody giant spider costume on the top. You know, anything is better than that. You know? But I think it does work. I think, you know, like I say, particularly at the end, when it's sort of approaching the town, there is a real sense of scale.
Yeah. There's that
you
great...
really get an idea of how big it is.
Yeah, exactly. There's that great moment when I think it's Steve, right, who gets attacked in the house, and she kind of looks out the window and it's just there, like its fangs just looming through the window, right? It's great.
Yeah, it's very scary, isn't it? Sort of... it reminds me a little bit, bear with me on this one, of the Cloverfield monster in the first Cloverfield, where he sneaks up on people, hilariously sneaks up on people. It's a wonderful scene in Cloverfield where they get ready to go on the helicopter. And suddenly the monster's just there. It's like this gigantic, you know, skyscraper-sized monster. It's just snuck up on them on tiptoes, you know? And the same with this thing. It's a huge, great giant spider which just suddenly appears outside someone's window.
Oh, my God.
Now, that's hilarious and terrifying at the same time.
The problem is nothing ever lived up to King Kong, does it, in that regard?
No,
for these sorts of that incredible, quite disturbing moment when King Kong reaches in through a woman's flat and kills her, right? In New
just
York.
callously throws her out the window.
You know.
And then, like, you know, 5 minutes later, you're expected to cry for him.
And you do.
But he's a callous murdering machine because he's just an ape.
That's the thing, isn't it? Is that the giant monster movie kind of peaked with the first one almost, you know?
It peaks in 1933. Everything else is playing catch up.
It does.
Yeah.
So there you go. Is there anything else you want to mention on Tarantula? I mean, it's not, you know, it's not the greatest require film. A huge amount of discussion, does it?
It's okay. It's an okay film. I wouldn't say to people don't watch it, and I was quite happy to have watched it again last night.
Yeah.
Certainly go and see it. I think see Tarantula first and then see them.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're going in the right direction in terms of quality. But yeah, it holds up okay. It has its charms again.
It got, and again, I'm just looking at some of the reviews. It got fairly decent reviews. Leonard Maltin gave it 3 out of 4 and said it was one of the best giant insect films at the time. So, it got played as part of a double bill, often with a film noir called Running Wild, by the looks of it, in driving movie
I
theaters.
love the way they used to mix those things up back in the day. My favourite one being nothing to do with this, but I have to tell this story because it's great. When I think it was Doctor Who and the Daleks went on release in America, it was teamed with Night of the Living Dead.
Oh,
because that's the way you get little children interested in British science fiction.
Yes, I always think of that with the film Eyes Without a Face as well, because it was kind of renamed in America. Was it like Dr. Faust or Torture Chamber?
Torture Chamber of Dr. Faustus.
That's it, exactly.
Yeah.
It got played with kind of silly, other kind of B movies like that. And you're like, what the hell? This kind of like beautiful, profound kind of art house masterpiece, Did
they actually watch it before they did anything with it? I mean, really?
Exactly. Yeah, it got played on a double bill with The Muncer. Incredible.
Amazing, isn't it? It would have been a hell of a night out, but come on, you could have thought of something better to put it on with, surely.
There you go. So that's Tarantula. Now, we haven't got time to cover all of the other millions of movies like this, Kev, but I just want to finish by asking you, do you have any other kind of atomic, quote-unquote, atomic monster movies from this era that you would recommend people check out off the back of these?
You did him last year, or her last year. It begins and ends with Godzilla.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The ultimate in atomic monsters. Yeah. I'd put in a bid for The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Not a great film, but not a bad film.
That's the one with the sort of dinosaur, right? A sort of prehistoric creature is woken up by radiation or whatever.
The Ray Bradbury story that it was derived from. The incredible shrinking man, he goes through a cloud, a radioactive cloud, and then he's got giant cats and spiders to deal with. So it's a giant monster movie, but in reverse, in a way. Yeah. But Godzilla is, not king of the monsters for any other reason. He's just the king of the monster, king of the atomic monsters.
Absolutely, yeah.
Godzilla -1. Start with Godzilla -1. You may never watch another one because it doesn't really get much better than Godzilla -1, which I actually regard as a total masterpiece.
I agree. Having watched most of them last year, that was quite a journey. I would say personally, you can stick to the original and -1, basically, unless you really want to dive in. It's
unless you really want to see Godzilla doing a Highland fling, in which case watch Monster Zero, because that is a riot and a half.
Exactly.
And by which time, of course, he stopped really being an atomic monster. He was just a giant monster. He's only an atomic monster in the first few films. So just Godzilla and Godzilla -1, and you cannot go wrong with that.
And these movies were actually, this wave of movies, at least in Hollywood, was fairly short-lived, right? I mean, mid-50s till, I would say, early 60s, and it was then like the pendulum swung back the other way, wasn't it? We had Gothic with Hammer, we had, obviously, the sort of Psycho Peeping Tom kind of real-life horrors that were overtaking. So these, it's considered so fondly, this wave of 50s monster movies, but it was a relatively short-lived kind of phenomenon, wasn't it?
Well, no, they were easy for children to see.
Yeah.
So we were often seeing them much younger than we were seeing the Hammer films, for example, because they were sexy and bloody, and parents didn't like us watching them, but they didn't mind us watching them.
Yes,
because that was just a silly film about giant ants.
Exactly.
So of course we have childhood memories of these films, so there's a huge amount of affection for them, and quite rightly so.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you know what I mentioned about the punctuation mark on the poster? It does actually have an exclamation mark for Tarantula, but this is like what you were saying, Kev, how you've got to check the actual official title in the film, right? Because it doesn't have an exclamation mark in the film, I don't think.
One day I will do my own podcast, and I will do one whole episode where I'm just going to bore everybody to death about the niceties of what a film title actually is, because some of them are not quite clear-cut at all.
I know. Well, James Swanson had a moan about this, because there are certain posters that call it The Bride of Frankenstein.
That's right,
It's actually Bride of Frankenstein.
Bride of Frankenstein, right? That's what the title card says. On EOFF TV, my website, I was putting up title cards to try and head off any sort of people saying, "Oh, you've missed a third."
Yeah.
No, look, there's what it says on the screen. You may have seen it on the poster. You may have seen people calling it that in books, but yeah.
Oh, I love it. Well, there you go. Well, Kev, thank you as always. Such a pleasure.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I love doing these things. You know that. So thank you. Thank you for always asking me back.
Well, no, always. And actually, you're back again soon enough, Kev, because we've got a little movie called 2001: A Space Odyssey to talk about at some point.
Oh, yes, my favourite film of all time. We've been talking for about an hour and a half here. I would take a couple of days off when I start to talk about 2001.
Good to know.
I did do a podcast very early on in my podcast career, air quotes again, about 2001. I started the film running in the background for atmosphere.
Yeah.
It had finished and I was still going, and that included the intermission. So brace yourself. I've got lots to say, even more than I had to say in that one, because I've had more ideas about it since.
Brilliant. Oh, well, I can't wait. So people can tune in for that in a few weeks' time. People can also catch you every week now on the Hammer Time podcast as well.
Oh, yes.
Very exciting.
Oh, yeah. I cannot tell you how excited I am about that. I'm hoping, my sincerest hope with that podcast is that people who've never seen Hammer before will join us.
Oh, yeah. I think
they'll go and find the films on streaming or buy them or download them or whatever you need to do to watch these films with us.
Yes.
And sort of, join us on the journey, as it were, and let us know how you're getting on. That will be terrific.
Definitely. Well, there you go. And other than that, Kev, let people know where else they can find you out there if they want even more Kevin Lyons than that,
Oh, good God, why would anybody want more Lyons? But if you do, EOFF-TV. EOFF-TV.com is my main website. EOFF-TV Review is where you can find thousands of reviews of these sort of films. I'm on social media. At the moment, I'm on Blue Sky, Facebook, and that thing that used to be Twitter, which I may not be on for much longer because it annoys me. But I'm on those at the moment. Come and find me if you're on there. Come and say hello. Come and tell me I'm an idiot. Come and tell me I'm overexposed or whatever. I'm quite happy. I can take it. I'm a big boy and I can take it. Yeah. But no, come and say hello. It's always nice to meet other fans and talk about these films. It's great.
Absolutely. Always. Amazing. Kev, thank you so much for your time.
Always a pleasure.
And that's it for this week. Thank you all so much for listening. And one more time, a huge thank you to one of my favourite people, Kevin Lyons. Always such a pleasure to have Kevin back on the podcast. And as we mentioned there, if you want to hear Kevin Lyons every single week, we have a brand new EOH Network podcast, Hammer Time, in which Kevin Lyons and Becky Dark will be going through every Hammer horror movie in chronological order. Episode 1 is going to drop next week, and episodes will drop every single Wednesday from this point onwards. So subscribe to Hammer Time wherever you get your podcasts. But also let us know what you thought of this week's Evolution of Horror episode. Are you a fan of the Atomic Monsters movies? Drop us a line. You can email me, evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. You can also find Evolution of Horror on Instagram and Facebook. You can find me, Mike Muncer, on Instagram and Blue Sky. If you want to discuss this week's episode with fellow listeners, you can join the Evolution of Horror Discord or the Evolution of Horror discussion group that's on Facebook. If you want to get ad-free versions of these episodes and get regular bonus episodes, sign up to our Patreon, patreon.com/evolutionofhorror. This podcast is part of the EOH Network. I can't believe how many weekly podcasts I am now producing, but you can also listen to Carry On Up the podcast with me and Susan Kalman, and Hammer Time with Kevin Lyons and Becky Dark. Next week, speaking of Hammer, we return to the world of Hammer. I'm going to be joined by Graham Saunders, and Graham and I are going to be discussing The Two Faces of Dr. Jekyll from 1960 and Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde from 1971. Join us next week for all of this and more on the Evolution of Horror.